Hello everyone. I hope you can all see and hear me, and I also hope you see the presentation I'm sharing with you right now. Welcome to today's webinar with the subject SAP Cybersecurity Beyond Authorizations. My name is Steen Schledermann, and I'm the director of the GRC line of business at Itelligence Nordic. I will introduce today's webinar. We are excited to see the huge interest in today's subject and looking forward to presenting our take on SAP security challenges and eventually having a conversation with you on how our approach can support your SAP security strategies. This session is being recorded. It will not be publicly available afterwards. However, you will receive an email with a link to the recording for your own replay if you'd like to. Today's agenda looks like this. After the welcome introductions, we will be introduced and have a demonstration of a holistic SAP cybersecurity platform provided by our strategic partner, SecurityBridge. And after this presentation, we will have a Q&A session where we seek to answer your questions raised in the chat during the presentation. So please be welcomed to enter your questions at any time in the chat window. During the session, we ask you to participate in a few polls to reflect on different ways of addressing SAP security. Following the Q&A session, we will welcome you to join the Talk to the Expert session, where the microphone will be open for anyone to have a more informal conversation on related subjects of your interest. To join the session, you simply stay on the webinar after the Q&A session, and we encourage you, of course, to participate to get even more insights on how to enable a holistic SAP cybersecurity strategy. Itelligence is a global SAP partner and part of the global company entity Data. With our Nordic Itelligence GRC line of business, we have the mission statement, digital trust through digital accountability management, which we aim at fulfilling with our customers through strategic technology partnerships. And today, you have the opportunity to meet my colleagues Peter Jäger and Wasim Aslam in the Meet the Expert session. SecurityBridge is a strategic SAP technology partner of Itelligence, and SecurityBridge is a specialized SAP security vendor providing advanced cybersecurity for SAP. And today you have the opportunity to meet presenter Ivan Mans, who is the CTO and co-founder of SecurityBridge, as well as his colleague Christoph Nagy, who is the CEO and co-founder. So let's get on to the subject of today. We call this webinar SAP Cybersecurity Beyond Authorizations. And why do we do that? In a historical perspective, SAP security has been defined and often limited to only focusing on data access control managed through roles and authorizations. Data access control and SAP roles and authorizations are highly important aspects of SAP security and often challenging organization due to the complexity of this discipline. However, the terms of running a successful digital business have significantly changed with increasing risk of cyber attacks and strong motivation of financial gain by cyber criminals to gain control of businesses. Exploits of SAP vulnerabilities, they are shared among cyber criminals of the dark web, and therefore a more holistic approach to SAP security need to be included in the overall cybersecurity strategy. Further threats worth mentioning are insider risks and increasing requirements to security compliance. So the global risk landscape has changed and called for appropriate cybersecurity strategies covering all of the business critical assets of which the SAP landscape in most cases is part of. The complexity of SAP and the many individual security controls of SAP are likely part of the explanation of the historic traditions of the SAP security understanding. SAP is promoting their SAP Secure Operations Map reference model to motivate a change of traditions. This reference model, with its 5 layers and 16 specific security topics, clearly indicates what an SAP best practice requires in terms of securing the SAP landscape. SAP is not secure by default, and it is required that a holistic and proactive effort to secure an SAP landscape appropriately. At a time where digital transformation is at the top of most digital business strategy agendas, a holistic and digital cybersecurity strategy for SAP is required. And with today's presentation by SecurityBridge, we will see what this is all about, how it is possible to get in control of the complex challenge of SAP security and compliance. A few words before we move on to the actual introduction and demonstration of the agenda. I just want to mention how itelligence can help you in relation to the SAP technology provided by SecurityBridge. At the itelligence, we offer a security proof of value process, which is a 30-day process where you see the solution in action in your own system and learn how the solution supports the various challenges of SAP security. We also offer annual SecurityBridge subscriptions matching the size of your SAP landscape and supporting you in the process of establishing the solution and related security processes. On our 2021 roadmap of new services, we are planning to offer an advanced SAP security as a service based on the SecurityBridge platform, which we look very much forward to be able to offer many of our customers who may find the challenge of SAP security beyond current capabilities, but still want to get started on the journey. So with this introduction, I would like to introduce you to CTO and co-founder of SecurityBridge, Ivan Mans, who will further introduce a holistic SecurityBridge platform to us and demonstrate some of the many SAP security measures. And please don't hesitate to provide your questions in the chat as we go along. So thank you, and over to Ivan.
So thank you, Steen, and good morning to everyone in today's session. And as Steen just said, do not hesitate to put your questions on the right-hand side into the chat. Now, while we go along, while I talk you through a short demo, I will also try to answer, the majority of the questions that you may have. Now, questions which will remain unanswered. Now, we can also have a follow-up later on in the expert session, which we will have immediately after today's short presentation. Now, let me give you at first a very short introduction onto, what is SecurityBridge. Now, SecurityBridge is an SAP add-on. It's a certified SAP add-on, which actually installs within your existing SAP landscape. So it's very important you do not need to have any new and advanced hardware in order to run the platform, which is a key element to speed to security. Now, the topic of today's call was also to talk about cybersecurity beyond authorizations, and that's exactly what we're going to do. Now, SecurityBridge is a holistic security platform. And with that, we mean we focus on multiple dimensions of security in order to grow the overall security posture. I know it's actually key important not to just focus on a single capability, but it is the combination of all the capabilities all together that will help you to improve the security posture of your SAP landscape. Now, starting off on the very top, we see vulnerability management. Now, within vulnerability management, also clearly authorization, handling, and verification of critical profiles, etc. That's all included within vulnerability management. But in addition, now there's many more things. Now, as Steen already said, now if you boot up a brand new S4 box, it is not secure by default. You still have to go through a lengthy process to actually secure your SAP environment. Now, that's what we cover within vulnerability management. We apply a static validation on your system, verifying system parameters, profile parameters, authorizations, code base, etc. So there's an enormous amount of validations that we perform, and the basis of those validations is also the SAP Security baseline, which many people may already know. Now, SAP Security baseline is a great document. Now, we've also complemented it with the DSAG standard, the German SAP user group standard. It also has a fantastic baseline. Now, this will get organizations up and running in no time. All the configuration that we deploy, it actually comes readily available out of the box. So speed to security is very, very important. Now, another capability where unfortunately not too many customers actually focus upon, but that's, it's of growing importance, is patch management. Now, every second Tuesday of the month, SAP as a vendor, they actually provide security patches for their own software for the platform. Now, unfortunately, we see that many SAP customers do not apply regular patching. And just recently we've seen the very first publicly available exploits can just be downloaded from the internet. So patching your environment remains very, very important. Now, what do we do with patch management? Now, we have an online platform as well where we collect all the SAP security nodes, so we complement them with security advisories. Very often you can't just implement the security patch because it has to go through some rigorous testing. And until you will be able to apply a patch. Now, what we do is we will ensure that we apply virtual patching. Now, what does virtual patching mean in the world of SAP? Now, we will enable you to at least identify potential exploits of existing vulnerabilities. So we can zoom in onto patch management shortly during the actual demo. Now, another key capability is code security. Now, a vast majority of all SAP security flaws actually finds its root cause within the code base. And for that reason, it is also important to not only have SAP validate their issues, and because they provide fixes through SAP security nodes, but within your own code base, you would also have to validate your code base to make sure there is no risk for SQL injections, backdoors, etc. And so there's an enormous amount of different attack vectors that reside within the ABAP or the UI5 code base. Now, the last capability on this slide, and this is probably also one of the power capabilities that we deploy with SecurityBridge, that is that continuous monitoring. Now, the WatchGuard on duty 24/7, we monitor what all is happening in your system. And this is also the capability that would allow you to even identify the exploit of even zero-day vulnerabilities. 0 days of vulnerabilities which no one is yet aware of, and no remediation or mitigation is yet available. And therefore, it is very, very important that you also continuously monitor the system. So whenever there is a security critical event, that you at least gain the visibility into this. And in order for you to also instantly start remediating the topic. Good. Now, So far, the slideware, but we are actually a software vendor, so we prefer the software. So I suggest I'm going to guide you quickly through our demo lab. And if I'm not mistaken, we may also have a poll question that we may want to see being answered. Now, the poll question you will find on your right-hand side. That should pop up any minute. And meanwhile, I'm pulling up my demo lab. Just hold on a second. Okay, very good. Now, apparently, it took a bit longer for me to load it, but we do have a connection to our demo lab. Now, when you install SecurityBridge, greenfield, entirely new installation, this is also the standard launchpad that you get to see. On the bottom side, you see a number of tiles. Now, in every single tile here, it actually corresponds to a capability within the platform. And we won't have the time to go through all the capabilities. So if you would have specific questions on some of the tiles that you see, or you would like to have more information, I do invite you to stay a bit longer on the call, and you can always speak to me directly in the expert session afterwards. Now, a quick word on the architecture, because clearly you may not have just one single SAP system, you may have a number of systems. And systems may range from production boxes, acceptance boxes, sandboxes. So you will have probably a fairly large range of SAP systems. Now, it is very key you monitor every single system and do not only just look at your production systems, because we have seen in the wild, if there is a data breach, very often the attack pattern actually starts non-production, but on the less secured sandboxes and development boxes, because the hardening standard that has been applied is way less strict. Good. Now, if you look at security, where do you start? Now, the majority of the customers, and this is typically also what we would recommend, independent upon how mature your organization is in security, you probably want to know, how secure am I actually? What is my current risk? Now, and that would bring us to the security and compliance monitor. Now, the security and compliance monitor it's actually a security dashboard. It gives you an overview of all your systems in your landscape, and for every single system, you get a security rating. And so that also allows you to actually gauge systems against each other. Now, in our demo lab, we got a HANA box, Java box, and an ABAP, a number of ABAP systems. Now, these are also the 3 stacks that SecurityBridge is supporting. Now, again, also cloud applications. Some of them are already supported, and some of them are on the roadmap. And so it's definitely not only on-premise. Now, let's have just a random look at one of the ABAP systems. Now, as soon as I click on a single system, we instantly get to see an insight into what's my current security rating. And here we see this particular box is rating with a 23% security rating, which is not very good. Now, in school, this you would flunk. Now, unfortunately, this is also how typically we see this at customers, because if you install SAP, it's not secure by default. You still have to go through that process to step by step harden your system. Now, what is a bit misleading or a bit frustrating in this slide is the fact that my trend, it's a flat line. So I'm not improving my situation even. I'm also not getting worse in this case. Now, typically with customers, as soon as they start using SecurityBridge, they have an insight into the main core vulnerabilities. And you will also see typically there are a lot of low-hanging fruits, sometimes with very easy fixes. You can actually improve your security posture quite a bit. And then you would also see here the trend indicator would be a green arrow that goes up, means that you're improving, which at the end, that's the entire target that we have. Now, which are the areas that you need to focus on? Clearly, authorizations is a key component, but typically authorizations mainly deal with the inside risk. Now, on the right-hand side, we see a security rating per area of responsibility. And those areas are, to a great extent, mapping to how you may internally be organized. You've got an SAP authorization team, you have an SAP development team, you've got an SAP basis team. So for every single different area of responsibility, we have a number of controls. Now, these controls, they are represented as tiles, and every single tile, again, will have a number of controls behind them, a number of use cases. Now, it's a fairly extensive list of validations that we perform, and all of these checks, they are very well documented in SAP Security Baseline, the SAP standard, combined with our own product experience. Now, with SecurityBridge, it's not only about just identifying those vulnerabilities, it's actually providing that guidance to step-by-step improve your security posture. Because you want to shield yourself, you want to protect your crown jewels. Now, but since we started off with authorizations, let's maybe have a quick deep dive into a sample finding on this box. As soon as I click on the authorizations, we get to see all the controls that we have performed or what the tool has performed. Now, clearly, you can always define your own controls, you can extend it, but we also realistically see that 98% of our customers, they just use the tool as is. You don't need to modify, you don't need to configure a lot on it. I take just randomly the very first use case, and the very first use case says that this box is having 64 users. It's a test box, so we don't have hundreds and thousands of users. But out of those, 35 of them have critical authorization assignments. This is not in balance. If you would have a large box, you may have a number of critical authorizations assigned to users because, day-to-day support purposes. But not half the community should have an SAP All, as an example. And here we see this box has 47 SAP All assignments across all clients. Now, this audit, this result is something that you can easily get. It is not very difficult to get. Now, what becomes important is this is a static validation. This is the today. If you would have an auditor coming in today, now they would see these results. Now, what an auditor would not see, and this is what making the story actually very, very complete, is what did happen over time. Did someone have an authorization, maybe for a very specific period in time? These were the things that typically, an auditor would actually miss. Now, within SecurityBridge, we combine the static view with that event-based view. And, I'll just take a random example here. We have a very high severity alert just a few days ago, and it relates to an authorization cover-up. So there is intelligence that enables SecurityBridge to identify authorization assignments and deprovisioning. And we also start correlating how much time did go in between. And this alert would say there's an authorization cover-up, a certain critical rule was assigned to a test user by a dialog user, and it was assigned for 6 minutes. Now, what did happen during those 6 minutes? That's a very key question. And that's also something that we got to say that on the monitoring side, as soon as we deep dive into the monitoring component, this is also something that SecurityBridge can actually answer, because we monitor the system 24/7 continuously. You can't avoid it. Now, this is just an example of authorizations. Now, how do we handhold, how do we guide customers to start securing their system? We work with the concept of accepting a risk or mitigating a risk. Now, and for every single finding, for instance, here we got an example of a dialog user in client 00, should actually not exist, but anyway, in this case, it does exist. It's a sandbox. Now, I can mark that line. I can mark that issue, that vulnerability that we've identified. And I could either say, accept the risk, and you start documenting why you accept the risk. You can give it a certain validity. And by going through all of these validations, all of these risks, and you start documenting them, the tool will actually start learning. The tool will no longer raise those alerts for you. And that's important. You need to step by step actually grow this insight into your system and get things in order. Now, if you'd say this is actually not okay, then you could also say, generate a ticket, generate an incident. Now, if you generate an incident, it flows into the SecurityBridge Incident Manager, which also actually integrates with about any ITSM tool that you may already be working with internally. And so you do not necessarily have to use our tooling for that. It's important, SecurityBridge needs to become an integrated process within your organization. Security is not a project. It's something that you need to apply on a continuous basis. Good. Now, we did promise that we would look a little bit further, just beyond authorizations. And typically a good thing is that we may want to talk about passwords. So I just searched for the word password on the right top corner, and then I could see, we've got a number of controls that deal with passwords. Now we also have things that deal with, profile parameters that drive the length and steer the length of a password, etc. But I just want to take a random example of a thing that we see at many locations. Passwords. Ideally you should not use passwords. Passwords in the space of SAP, they are a very weak shackle in the chain. Ideally you avoid them. Now if you do use them, make sure that you also secure your password. Make sure that the length is sufficiently long, etc. All of these things are well documented within the platform. We validate it, but there are also a bit more advanced things that you may want to verify. You may want to verify whether the tables that contain password hash values, are they properly secured? Do you maybe still have all password hash values in the table that need cleansing? And if they would need cleansing, how would you cleanse them? This is a good example here. We see this box still has some old password hash values. We did not, we may have upgraded the algorithm, but we did not clean all the old hashes. Now, the vulnerability here would be if someone gains access to these hash values, it's actually peanuts to brute force passwords. There's tons of external tools to do so. Once passwords are brute forced, it's also very easy to gain a full insight, to get privileged access to an SAP system. So again, also here you can deep dive, and for every single finding there will be a very short inline risk description. Now that's important. If you work with a tool, you need to understand what's the risk. There's also about the knowledge base that will bring you to a more advanced knowledge base. That's a knowledge base that we share across all our customers. Customers can even provide feedback through that channel. But it's important to really, step by step, have that guidance. Now, if you've installed SecurityBridge and you get the security rating, you get an instant insight into how secure you are today. We provide you the means to step by step, work on it and really improve that scoring. Now, once the scoring, very often, and I may have mentioned that before, just with a few low-hanging fruits, it's actually easy to, at least from the outside, properly shield your SAP environment. Good. Now, this is just one capability. That's static view. Now, this static view, you may call it once a week. You may execute all of those checks once a week, once a month. That will allow you to also track your progress. Now, another key capability that I would like to shortly talk about is the monitoring. Monitoring is of utmost importance. You need to keep an eye on what all happens. And especially when you're new to SecurityBridge and you install it for the very first time. Now, a lot of my colleagues say, customers actually get to see sometimes the inconvenient truth, because they see things they may have not been aware of. So these known unknowns. Now, luckily, I'm opening the box here. Now, the last 1 hour, we had 0 high severity event, which is a good thing. This is also how it should be. If this number is any different from 0, it means something is going on. Now, how do we know what's going on? That is because we are actually monitoring all the potential attack vectors. Now, when we start designing the platform as of 2012, we did an index on how can you breach SAP? What are even the potential vectors to get into SAP, to perform data theft and so on? And for every single vector, we have written what we call a sensor or a listener. We've written a piece of software that is actually able to identify such abuse, exploits. And the way SecurityBridge works, now we did not reinvent the wheel, that's very important. We make use of what SAP already has. SAP has done a tremendously good exercise to enable customers to record everything that happens in an SAP system. You got the security audit log. A security audit log is a very central data source. It's a good data source. But security audit log is not always complete. I can still perfectly hijack an SAP box without leaving breadcrumbs in the audit log. If I do a code inject, the audit log is not going to see that. Now, therefore, we also look at the gateway log, the HANA log, change documents, etc. So there's about 20 different standard SAP data sources that SecurityBridge is assessing in real time. So SecurityBridge is running as a continuous job on all your systems, and it is going through that mass of logs, and it is filtering out everything that is security critical. Now, a lot of people may say, yeah, but if I activate my logging, it is going to generate gigabytes and gigabytes of data. And sometimes that's true, but it's only a very small fraction of that enormous amount of data that is actually really security critical. A lot of the data is context information. Let me give you an example. If you would create a user in SAP, you go to the audit log, it's a red alert. Now, we got customers that have thousands and thousands of users, and every single day, a lot of users get created, deleted, changed, and so on. It's not a red alert. It would result in security fatigue. It's important to actually identify what is a true security risk in the system, and that you can only do by looking at what is the trend, what is normal for your system. You can already see it on the top. We also apply anomaly detection. So statistically, we verify if a user gets created, is that user created through the normal process? If you use central user administration, then you know exactly how users are created. And you would mark those events as you would filter them out. They're not relevant for monitoring. But as soon as maybe a user gets injected, or you've got a raw basis consultant creating a user, assigning super rights, and actually using that user all of a sudden, that's a security risk. And that's exactly what SecurityBridge does. We filter out what is security critical, add the necessary context information onto it in order to make alerts speaking and actionable. If you go to the audit log, very often you would see that a lot of those alerts are very cryptic. You would have no idea what's going on. Now, in the last 1 hour on this box, we see we have a lot of issues with the data user. Now, very likely, someone is either abusing the data user, or maybe there is a job schedule with data that should actually not be scheduled. So there's a risk matrix that you can see which are the users that actually need some attention. Now, we also see which of the listeners or sensors have been triggered in the last 1 hour. Now, we've seen, we had a password-based logon. Now, we internally on the demo lab as well, we don't use passwords. We use single sign-on. Apparently, someone still used a password. We also see someone performed a generic data extract. The generic data extract could be you go into SE16, you perform a data download. We monitor all the downloads, and there will be a lot more. Now, I do have a few examples, a few filters that I've pre-created. So if I click on some sample events, we, for instance, here see an event. Now, there has been an authorization cover-up. Authorization was assigned for 6 days and 22 hours. Now, this instantly stands out. Now, another example here is we have a critical permission. So there was a critical role. Now, which roles are critical? It's not for you to need to know. SecurityBridge comes pre-configured with all the security critical roles. Now, that's the default config. Of course, you can always apply and modify. You can add your own rules to it that may be security critical in your environment. And here we see this person actually performed a self-service. He assigned authorizations to his own account. Now, you could also see there is an I behind it. Now, SecurityBridge also allows you to action automatically. You don't want to sit behind the screen 24/7. That's clear. Once you know what's going on in your system, you may want to establish certain automated actions. Now, if someone performs a self-service assignment, maybe that's a process that may be acceptable in your environment. But then at least you want to know what's going on. So what SecurityBridge then does or can do is activate hyperlogging. As soon as someone receives elevated rights, we activate hyperlogging, which means that we're not only looking at what is that person doing security-wise, what is security critical, but we actually start recording all the transactions, all the data they are posting. And so this actually allows you to very selectively look at events that happen in your system caused by elevated rights, and so on. There's a lot more to it. Now, I may want to bring up, another good example, and security audit. This is SAL files. Now, security audit log. It's very important to understand. SecurityBridge is a security platform. It's of course of utmost importance that we also keep a very close eye on what happens to my central audit logging. Is someone maybe not trying to delete audit logging? And this is an example. I went actually I did not do this from within SAP. SecurityBridge is an SAP application monitoring suite. But we actually take it a step further. We can also, and we actually also look at what happens on the database, and especially when we talk about HANA databases. So HANA is just not a normal; it's actually an application layer on its own. So we also monitor that, those vulnerabilities within the HANA database very closely, but also what happens on the operating system. Clearly, we're not monitoring whether your Windows machine is missing some patches. For that, there's many other tooling. But what we do monitor is if the directory that contains either an access control list or it contains a security audit log files. Now, if something happens to those files directly on the OS itself, this is also what SecurityBridge will identify. And here we've seen, now we do not know who actually performed or who deleted this, because that data is just not available when you approach it from the SAP angle, but you do know it did happen. Now, we do have an option that allows you to jump into the fine details. So you can see how often did this already happen. Now, this happened 5 times in the last 1 day. And so it did not happen very frequently. And that itself is also a bit bizarre. So that will allow for more forensic investigations. Now, that we can also do is the second event that we have, actually also modify the security audit log at that time. If I go into the details, now you could see there's a risk description, but very interesting is a timeline. SecurityBridge allows you to correlate events by user, by time, and in sequence. So if someone would be building up an attack plan, very often if you see an SAP breach building up, you would not see just a single event. It's typically a sequence of individual events that will result in, in an actual data breach or an attack on the system. Now, this view allows you to see what did that user do over time across your entire landscape. And so maybe this is now just an example where we only have one system involved. But if I would be logging onto a development box, I would, through an RFC channel that is insecure, I would jump to a production box or an acceptance box. All of these events across your system, they would be intercorrelated. And exactly this route will help us to correctly set a security rating for an event. So all of that data you have here readily available. Now, let's have a look at one final example. Which one shall we have a look at? Now, critical data download. I think this is a good speaking example as well. Now, SecurityBridge monitors everything that happens. Data download, interface traffic, user behavior, etc. But it's important to data loss prevention. You may want to know who is actually extracting data from the system. Now, in this example, we performed a data download from a USR 02. It is a demo box. We don't have credit cards or any customer or user master on the system. So I did the example with some user master data. I downloaded all the password hashes into my local machine. Now, it's a low severity because it happens very often, this example on our demo box. But what's special about it is it's triggered with transaction SE16, just table display. So I went into the table display and I extracted the data. It's key that we know what kind of data is leaving your organization. Also, if you would just copy paste it to your clipboard, also there we have an example. We have a way to actually track that potential data loss that you have. So as you see, there's a lot of use cases. Now, all of these use cases actually come entirely pre-configured. So if you would look for the word listener here and you would start saying everything that deals with, debugger, you start typing the word debugger and you could see, show me everything that happened with the debugger across my entire landscape. I do the search, click on the search. Now, there's nothing now, but let's see, was there anything today? Was there anything last week? And I may have to reset my filter first of all. So I go into debug. There should be something on this box that, so we have a number of debug activities. So there was a debug override. Someone has overwritten a certain value. Now, we're not just reading the alerts from the audit log. We actually apply, we add a lot of context information to it. If a developer is using the debugger on production to bypass an authorization check, now that severity rating is going to be very different than if it would do it on development. I see. For instance, here, this was done on a production box. There was a program flow change. They jumped from one line of code to the other line of code. We would also scan what's within the code, etc. So anyway, there is an enormous amount of events here that you can look at. Now, I do invite everyone, if you think about securing your system, do not forget to apply monitoring. It is key importance. Good. Now, I still see that we've got a few minutes time left. So I may also want to take the opportunity to talk about patch management, because patch management remains key, especially in the last few SAP patch days. There have been quite a number of nodes with an extremely high severity scoring, 9.9 to even a 10. Now, these are things that you need to resolve. This is not just a nice to do, it's actually a have to do. Because for some of these vulnerabilities that SAP has, we meanwhile also see exploits available in the wild, which means that even script kiddies, without having a thorough understanding of SAP, can actually try to breach SAP systems now. Good. Now, how do we do that? We have an online platform. You can go to it. It's ABEX.io Advisory. Now, it's an online platform, and I may quickly want to pull it up. It's an online platform where we, track all the SAP security nodes, and we also complement that with security advisories. This is an open platform. You can all have access to it. If you click on a single node, you would see, is there a workaround existing and so on. Now, a lot of that information is anyway, it is already publicly available. Now, what we've done is we've brought it all together, but the key thing is we also enable you to verify the status, the patching status of your system by connecting to that online service. So there is a button on the top right, latest advisories, you download them. You would have them locally on-premise. And what we then do is we would validate those patches against your system. Again, you get to see the same landscape view. We have a HANA box, Java box, and so on. And for every single system, you would see the patching status. We've not applied a single patch, not applied a single patch. Here we did apply a single patch, but in average, it takes about 3 years to apply a patch. So we're really running behind. Now, even though SAP releases, I think in average 20 to 30 nodes a month, and they've done that since 2010 already. So there's an enormous amount of patches. You still see that the number of nodes that I'm actually lacking behind is not dramatically high. A lot of patches may only be applicable to a certain number of systems. And so we take away the complexity for you to validate which are the patches that are relevant to my system by validating, do I even have the components running at all? Maybe my system is already sufficiently patched because my service pack is up to date, etc. So we give you an insight into how well patched are you. Now, when you bring up the details of a very specific system, we can see we are 8 hot news behind. Now, these 8, I would recommend everyone, please do apply these patches. Very, very important. The top ones you need to apply. Now, they can be implemented. So by default, we only show things that can be implemented. What we also do is you can actually define your own service levels. If you internally have a process that says, if it's a high severity node, you want to implement that, within a week, 2 weeks. You can set your own service level targets, and you also get an indication whether you're actually meeting your own targets. So this process will help you to prioritize patches and make sure that things actually get done and you start improving. Now, again, how do you apply a node? You just convert it into an incident. We don't go into automatic implementation because a lot of these nodes may require manual actions. If there are manual actions needed, you can also see that when you go into the fine details of the nodes. Good. Now, I do see a few questions coming up. Definitely we can definitely answer those in the follow-up sessions. But again, guys, if you've got any questions, please do not hesitate. Just put them into the chat. The more topics that we see that's there within the user community, I think the more valuable this session may also become. Good. Now, I still see we still have a bit of time left, so I do want to make use of that opportunity to also maybe give a bit of an insight into interface traffic monitoring. Now, SecurityBridge is anyway monitoring your entire platform. Everything that happens with the user base, with the interface base, everything is being recorded anyway. But very often it becomes difficult to really assess, what's my takeaway here? Where do I need to focus on in order to get better. Now, this is a visual, this is an interface map that allows you to visualize, your weaknesses, your security flaws within the interface management. For instance, we could see there's a very weak spot that we very often see is RFC security. You may have a number, SAP systems, they speak to each other. They have to speak to each other for monitoring reasons, but also to cooperate. Your ECC may speak to your APO, your BW, and so on. But it also leaves open doors. And it's important to, if you've got an open door, you need to make sure that, that door is properly secured. The handshaking that is there, when you use an RFC destination, for example, you need to make sure that you're using a user setup that is also not too broad. Now, this view, for instance, gives me an overview of where are my critical communication paths to connect from a non-production system to a production box. Now, ideally, it should never happen. Production shall never be connected to a non-production box, with exception of technical monitoring. But that traffic is whitelisted. And here we see I can actually go from an AED to my AE1 system with just one single hop. I can exploit a solution manager's destination. Now, why is that critical? Because the issue here is that RFC user actually has an SAP all. And so we continuously monitor what happens, and we create you that index so that you know which doors actually all to close off. Now, also more graphically, if you want to have an overview of what's my security critical communication, because over here on the top, I've only selected my security critical communication. We see the system AED is speaking to AE1. I click on that arrow, and we see we got 6 critical RFC calls. I go into the fine details, and indeed we see there's an RFC system info call. Now, RFC system info is a bit of a special one. Now, we can see it's only called 3 times, that, which does not mean it's an instant exploit. But very often if we see, people sniffing your network, looking for open ports and so on. Now, if they manage to get to an SAP system, there's one of the very first functions that you would see that, an exploit script is calling, because this function module, it does not need authentication. You do not need to provide a user and a password. It will just provide you the version of your SAP system. Once you know the version of your SAP system, you do not need to be, a space engineer to find the vulnerabilities, because, the SAP vulnerabilities, that you can find them everywhere nowadays. So you know exactly what may be potential vulnerabilities. Now, if this function module would be called more frequently, that could be an indication of a potential attack. Now, another example that we see here is BAPI user get detail. Someone has been trying to read user details. Now, why is this now so special? It's triggered with a dialog user. Now, if it would be an automated process like central user admin or whatever process that may be there in standard, it would not be triggered with a dialog user. So also this here, and you can click down and you can go into the events. If you would say, this is not relevant, you can actually create a filter, and then we're not even monitoring this anymore. So it's a different view on the same type of data that we have on the event-based and that static view as well. Good. Now, let me also quickly read out a question that I see in the chat. Now, SecurityBridge add-on, does it work as a SIEM, or is it used to integrate logs for SAP environments? Now, we're not entirely sure if I really get the question to the extent it was meant to be addressed. But SecurityBridge is, and as the name also says, it is the bridge between the complex world of SAP application security and the more traditional world and the more advanced world of IT security. So SecurityBridge is an open framework, and we have a plug-and-play interface that allows you to, everything that is security critical, everything that you would have seen in that event monitor in this application, all of these events, they would also be sent in real time to a SIM platform, to a SOAR platform, to a risk management platform, because we are an open framework. Everything is based upon OData services. Those OData services are very well secured as well. And so everything that you've just seen today in these Fiori apps, you can actually also consume for your internal dashboarding if you would have that externally. So that's also possible. Good. Now, that was a quick wrap up. I still have a few minutes left. Excellent, actually, very happy with that. one slide, one short highlight on code security. Now, code security, way more than 95% of all vulnerabilities, root cause, ABAP coding flaws. Now, we continuously scan codes. Every time a transport gets imported, a developer compiles the code, someone injects, you import third-party transports, we validate the code. Now, again, very similar overview. You get to see all the systems in your landscape, not all the boxes we probably have scanned. And, for instance, on this development box, we at the moment got 270 security issues. Now, all by all, that is not too bad. And you can also see by vulnerability type, you can see all the different vulnerability types. We actually highlight you which are the programs that do have some issues and that would need remediation. So again here, code base, it's an integrated element. So if someone would now modify or write the Z program that is having a coding flaw, SecurityBridge would identify it. You've got a static way to address this to your development community, so you know where to focus. But on the other hand, you also have that continuous monitoring. And so if I would now, for instance, go into the event monitor, I go and search for coding issues. If I go into the event, let's just take a random example. Just search for the word code. Then I see ABAP code vulnerabilities. Now, what did we have the last one day? We have a backdoor as an example. And so someone has been implementing a backdoor. It's actually within our own test environment. We can see someone actually hard-coded a username. Now, we know exactly why this is because this is on an S4D box. It is for testing purposes. I know the background is this, but we also internally, we actually use our own platform to the full extent as well. We are a development vendor. We are a software provider. And as soon as something like this would happen, you can also see there is an envelope behind this. It means that the developer, at the time they actually compiled the code, they would have already received an email. And also when they would have released the transport, and it would still be there. Since Code Inspector is something that we complement, this issue would be validated, and the person would actually not even be able to release the transport. So a lot more possible, but I think I'm shortly running out of time. And Steen, I would be very happy to hand over the word again to you.
Thank you, Ivan. That was a great presentation. Thank you very much. Let me see if I can get to share the screen again. Be lucky. Seems technology.
No, I'm not. Yeah, it's always about
Yes,
that's about
but
a
I
challenge
think
of the software nowadays.
we're doing good here. It seems like I'm sharing my screen again. So thank you very much, Ivan, for that very thorough walk around SecurityBridge, and it clearly indicates how many detailed aspects there is to be looked into in terms of security. So a very good example of why it makes a lot of sense to actually have a holistic view on this and applying a platform that can integrate all of the questions of relevance here in terms of security.